left our countries because of the war. Our parents were killed where we came from. Where are we going? We don't have anything out there where they claim that we should go and fix our countries. What we gonna go fix there? Because we've been here all our lives, past 25 years in this country, trying to survive, trying to raise our children.
They're actually attacking our own African people who helped us fight apartheid, who helped us build this country. So they feel betrayed right now, those people. And we have been losing a lot of businesses.
For over a year, this was the sound of South African politics outside Parliament. Not a party, not a union, a movement that called itself simply March and March, and for a while it looked unstoppable. Thousands in the streets of Durban, Pretoria, Johannesburg, shops shuttered along its routes. Cabinet ministers forced to respond publicly to its demands. A movement built on a single, blunt idea: undocumented immigrants must go. But something changed in the last few weeks. One of the movement's own most visible faces stood in front of a camera and said, in effect, "This has gone far enough, it's hurting the country's economy, and it's time to stop." That is not a message movements usually survive cleanly. So we're asking the question honestly, without pretending we already know the answer. Is this the beginning of the end for March and March, or just a leader losing his nerve while the movement marches on without him? The rise to understand the crack, you have to understand how fast this thing grew. March and March was founded by Jacinta Ngobi Zuma, a former Durban radio presenter turned civic organizer, and it grew out of a wave of frustration that had already been building in South Africa for years. Frustration over unemployment sitting above 30%, over strained public hospitals and schools, over the visible presence of undocumented migrants running informal businesses in townships where jobs were already scarce. The movement's early actions were localized, demanding identification at public clinics in KwaZulu-Natal, campaigns framed as cleanup operations in Durban CBD. But by early 2026, it had scaled into something else entirely, a coordinated nationwide campaign with a declared deadline: the 30th of June. The date by which organizers said government needed to act or the marches would intensify. They did not march alone. Along the way, March and March drew in and was drawn into a wider ecosystem of anti-immigration organizing. Operation Dujula, the Patriotic Alliance, figures from Action SA and the Inkatha Freedom Party appearing alongside them at rallies. Ngizwi Makunu, a former Ukhozi FM presenter previously charged and later acquitted over incitement connected to the deadly July 2021 unrest, became one of the movement's most recognizable faces, arriving at marches on horseback, drawing crowds in the thousands. By the 30th of June, Daily Maverick estimated more than 5,000 people gathered outside a single police station in Durban alone, with parallel demonstrations rolling through Johannesburg and Pretoria. Ngobi Zuma stood in front of that Durban crowd and made a promise. Marches would continue every Thursday for the next 6 months, until undocumented immigrants were, in her words, gone. This was no longer a local protest. It was a nationwide political force, arriving just as South Africa headed toward local elections, and that timing was never a coincidence. The machine behind the movement here is where the story gets harder to tell simply, because March and March presents itself as a grassroots civic organization, ordinary citizens, worried about jobs and safety, organizing peacefully. And for many of the people marching, that description is almost certainly sincere. But investigative reporting has found a more complicated picture behind the movement's public face. Daily Maverick traced the organization's lesser-known directors and financial backers back to networks connected to the Zuma family. The same political orbit that, in July 2021, was at the center of coordinated unrest that left hundreds dead and cost the economy billions. Reporters have noted that the shadow of Jacob Zuma hangs over this movement's key figures much the way it hung over that earlier crisis, raising a pointed question. Is this a spontaneous citizens' movement or a political project wearing the language of civil society? The organization itself pushes back hard on that framing. Its leadership insists it draws its mandate directly from the public, from surveys and structures built at the ground level in every province, and that it has deliberately chosen to stay out of electoral politics rather than become a party, precisely to avoid the coalition deals and internal party fights that come with it. Both things can be examined at once. A movement can be built from genuine public frustration and still be shaped, funded, and steered by people with their own political interests. That is not a uniquely South African story. It is one of the oldest stories in populist organizing anywhere in the world. The passion in the crowd is often real. Who is holding the microphone and who is paying for the sound system is a separate question entirely. And then there are the claims themselves. In one address that drew national fact-checking attention, Ngobi Zuma told a crowd that South Africa's township economy, genuinely worth close to 900 billion rand, was shrinking because of what she called the hijacking of that economy by foreign-run businesses. Independent economic reporting found the opposite. That contribution is not shrinking, and immigrant-run informal shops, research shows, often deliver lower prices to township residents precisely because of efficient supply networks, hardly the picture of an economy under hostile occupation. She also warned of a huge security threat from foreign-funded groups allegedly smuggling weapons. A acclaimed journalist who reviewed it found unsupported by any public evidence. None of this means the underlying frustrations are invented. South Africa's asylum system genuinely has a backlog of well over 160,000 unresolved appeals. Unemployment genuinely is severe. Public services genuinely are strained. The grievance is real. What investigators have challenged is not the existence of the problem. It's whether undocumented migrants are actually its cause, and whether the movement's leadership has been honest about the numbers it uses to make that case. The human cost of movement's rhetoric does not stay in the rhetoric. It moves into the street, and by mid-2026 it had. Reporting through the spring documented marches turning violent in Johannesburg, with vandalized foreign-owned shops and direct confrontations between protesters and shop owners. In Durban, a group of roughly 300 immigrants took refuge at a community center after fearing for their safety, and police had to form a physical barricade to keep March and March supporters from reaching them. On the 30th of June itself, 2 people, including a 17-year-old boy, were shot during a protest in Hillbrow, with police confirming 3 arrests in connection with the incident. This is the part of the story that cannot be softened for the sake of narrative balance. When a movement's stated goal is the forced removal of a category of people from a country, and its actions include crowds surrounding a refuge for frightened migrants, the distance between civic advocacy and vigilante intimidation becomes very thin, and multiple journalists covering it have said so plainly. The movement's leadership consistently frames its actions as peaceful and points to statements from law enforcement acknowledging that some events passed without major incident. Both things happened. Some marches were calm, others were not. A documentary that only shows one or the other is not being honest with its audience. Then, in the weeks after the 30th of June deadline, the movement suffered a loss no one had scripted: the death of one of its leaders, Andile Samksada. Rather than pausing to reflect, the organization's public response was to vow that its Thursday marches, particularly in Gauteng, would intensify, framing the moment as fuel rather than a reason to slow down. That response tells you something important about where the movement's center of gravity sits right now. Grief in this movement is being converted directly into momentum.
Ngoba we can't march forever, but we must march for the reason now and for the change. Not for complainants, but we march to the cleaner pastures. The cleaner pastures is to receive Uguti after we have placed a memorandum.
The fracture, and then, almost as suddenly, came the break that this documentary is built around. Ngizwi Makunu, the same figure who arrived at Durban marches on horseback, who stood shoulder to shoulder with Ngobi Zuma through the movement's biggest moments, went on camera and said the demonstrations had gone on too long, that they were damaging the country's image and risking real harm to the economy. He said the outcome from the 30th of June had been achieved, and it was time to stop. And critically, he didn't just step back himself. He publicly called on other leaders, including Ngozi Zuma, directly to do the same. The movement's response was immediate, and it was not gentle. A spokesperson pushed back within days, making a pointed correction for the public record. March and March has one founder, and it is Ngozi Zuma, not Makunu. And the movement's direction is set by her and its national structures, not by any single ally who chooses to step back. Read that exchange carefully because it is the whole story in miniature. A movement that spent over a year presenting a united front, Ngozi Zuma, Makunu, and allied organizations marching together, speaking with one voice, suddenly needed to clarify in public who was actually in charge. That is not a minor administrative correction. That is what it looks like when a coalition built on shared anger starts to fracture over shared responsibility. Is this the beginning of the fall? It is too early to say the movement is over. Its founder has committed publicly to 6 more months of weekly marches, and the death of some Ksada appears to have hardened, not softened, the resolve of those who remain. But it is fair and accurate to say something has cracked. The first public figure at the center of this movement has openly broken ranks, on the explicit grounds that the movement itself has become the harm it claims to be fighting. That is a different kind of ending than a government crackdown or a court order. It is the ending that comes from inside. What this means, step back from South Africa for a moment, because this story is bigger than one movement. Populist mobilizations built around blaming outsiders for domestic economic pain are not new in South Africa or anywhere else. They tend to follow a familiar arc: genuine grievance, charismatic leadership, rapid growth, media attention, political entanglement, and then, often, internal fracture, once the movement's own actions start producing consequences its members didn't sign up for. Vandalized shops, frightened refugees needing police protection from citizens, a teenager shot in the street, a leader dead. At some point, for some of the people who joined believing they were defending their communities, the math stops adding up. That appears to be where Ngozi Makunu found himself. Whether his break is principled, strategic, or self-preserving, and reasonable people watching this story can disagree, his public statement did something 100 fact checks from journalists had not yet done. It put a crack in the movement's own leadership, visible to every supporter watching. What happens next matters far beyond March and March itself. South Africa is heading into local elections with unemployment near a third of the workforce, real strain on public services, and real anger looking for a target. If this movement fractures, that anger does not disappear, it will look for its next vehicle. The question this documentary leaves you with is not really about Ngozi Zuma or Makunu specifically. It's about what a country does with grievance that is real, when the movement built to channel it starts to come apart from the inside. The marches may continue, but for the first time since this movement began, the people leading it are no longer marching in the same direction. The end